Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and we're out here taking a look at the Lexus GS 450h. Now there was a time where Lexus dominated the mid-sized hybrid vehicle segment because no one else made one. But now this is becoming a relatively crowded segment, so we can expect a number of these hybrid vehicle reviews hopefully this calendar year. We have the Mercedes E400 Hybrid, the BMW Active Hybrid 5, the Q70 Hybrid from Infiniti, which is formerly known as the M Hybrid, and of course we have that brand new Acura RLX which we saw recently. Audi has also indicated that they're going to bring the Audi A6 Hybrid to America, but we haven't seen it yet here, and it's not available for sale at this time. The Lexus GS in this redesign was the first vehicle to receive this new Lexus spindle grille up front, and I remember it causing an awful lot of drama in automotive as well as Lexus lover circles, because people thought it looked a little bit funny or it looked a little bit too big or whatever they thought was going on. A lot of people didn't seem to like it, but it really has grown on me. And if you take a look at how this has progressed across the lineup, especially with the recently refreshed Lexus LX, this grille looks positively demure and positively tiny. Overall, I think it's a very attractive and much more aggressive look than was going on in the Lexus GS of before. I'll post a picture so you can see that. Indeed, I actually think that this is a more aggressive look in your rearview mirror than the current generation 5 Series, which is trying to go for more of a luxury look lately. We have the Lexus signature LED daytime running lamp swoosh right here. It looks kind of like a Nike swoosh in the headlamp. And because we're in the hybrid model with all the options checked on this vehicle, we have the LED headlights right here. There's a full LED lamps, high beams and low beams going on right here. We also have LED fog lamps right here, and if you choose the right option package, they'll stick a radar cruise control sensor right here behind the Lexus logo. At 190 inches long, the Lexus GS is one of the shorter entries in this mid-sized performance hybrid segment. It is a couple inches shorter than the 5 Series or the E-Class, and about 6 inches shorter than the Acura RLX Hybrid. A note about that Acura RLX before we go too far. I don't really consider the front-wheel drive Acura RLX competition with the rear-wheel drive Lexus GS 350. However, the RLX Hybrid really is a competitor in this class. It's priced about right, it has a much more powerful all-wheel drive system, it's about the same size overall as well. The Lexus in this competition has a very elegant but restrained styling. It's very swoopy in this generation, and we have this very elegant kink right here in the rear door. At 190 inches long and 112 inches wheelbase, we have a shorter back seat than the rest of the competition. That is one thing to keep in mind, but we'll go over that more when we hop inside. The GS Hybrid has a simple but elegant rear end. Rather than the integrated exhaust tips we see in other models, we get hidden exhaust tips, so you don't really see them under here. We get an air diffuser for improved aerodynamics, and we get these fairly aggressive LED tail lamps right here. The Lexus hybrid system is rooted really in the Toyota Prius drivetrain. That was where this hybrid synergy drive, or as Lexus calls it, the Lexus hybrid drive system, really started. And this system doesn't use a transmission in the traditional sense. It uses 2 motor generator units, 1 planetary gear set, and that's really all that there is going on in the vehicle. That's part of why the Lexus hybrid system as well as that Toyota Prius hybrid system are very reliable, because there's relatively little going on in the mechanical sense on the inside of the transmission. That's very different from the other hybrid systems that are out there on the market, and it's very different from all those other luxury hybrids that you'll find out competing with this Lexus GS. The heart of this is a 3.5-liter V6 engine. Coupled with the batteries and those 2 electric motors, it produces a total of 338 system horsepower. That's fairly robust in this segment. The Mercedes hybrid is 302 horsepower, the BMW is 335, the Infiniti beats this system at 360 total system horsepower, and the most powerful hybrid right now is 377 horsepower in the all-wheel drive Acura RLX. The important thing to know about this system is that it behaves kind of like a CVT. A lot of people mistakenly call it a CVT because Toyota and Lexus have off and on called it an electronic CVT or an e-CVT. It's really kind of a disingenuous way to describe this device because it just is completely different than anything else out there on the market, and it behaves a little bit different than everything else out there on the market. Big thing to know is that it's very smooth because you don't have a torque converter, you don't have a clutch pack like you do in all these other competing systems, you don't have any gears to shift going on in the system, and that's why this vehicle scored about 32 to 33 miles per gallon in our week-long test of this car. Decently higher than all the other competitors in this segment, even though some of those other competitors are rated higher out on the highway or higher in the city than this Lexus hybrid. Our hybrid model has the optional 18-way power adjustable front seats. That's the driver and the front passenger, with 3-position seat memory for both the driver and the front passenger as well. That means that this vehicle ties with the BMW Active 5 Hybrid with the sport seats for the most comfortable seats in this segment. If you can't find a way to adjust this driver's seat that's comfortable for you, you probably aren't human. We also have a 6-way adjustable headrest right here. It has a butterfly motion, so you can actually curve the backs of the headrest in to sort of cradle your head like an airline headrest. We have a power adjustable tilt telescoping steering column as well. And Lexus uses a partial wood wheel. So this is bamboo on the top and the bottom here. It's a very attractive wheel. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that unlike other heated steering wheels out on the market, when you get the heated steering wheel, it only heats this small leather portion on the two sides of the wheel rather than the wood portion on top. Because the GS is the shortest in this immediate segment and it has the shortest wheelbase, we have the smallest rear seat as well. I'm 6 feet tall and my hair is brushing the ceiling just barely if I sit back completely in this seat. That's because the GS, like the other entries in this segment, have a more coupe-like profile. If you want to get something a little bit more traditionally styled like a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes E-Class, they will have a little bit more rear headroom because of that taller greenhouse in the back. Again, I'm sitting behind myself and I have a few inches of legroom left because I tend to like to sit in a fairly upright and forward position in the driver's seat. If I move over to this far side, this passenger seat was adjusted for a 6'5" passenger I had in the car. I have about an inch of legroom left there. It's a very spacious car when you compare it to the average sedan out on the road, but again, the 5 Series and the Mercedes would be a little bit bigger, with the Acura RLX having by far the most rear legroom due to its front-wheel drive architecture. If I move to the middle seat, it is a little bit tricky because this hump is fairly pronounced, as it would be in most rear-wheel drive vehicles. Again, the Acura RLX has a severe advantage there. It's really not possible to sit upright in this rear middle seat, however. You could do it if you had a child or so, but it is very, very upright because it's a very pronounced hump. So there's a huge height difference between this outboard seat bottom and this middle seat bottom. The back is also very upright as well. Rear passengers get this large and softly padded armrest with a storage compartment. We also have cup holders right here, power outlet right up here, and we have the optional 3-zone climate control, which gives you radio and climate control controls right here in the center console. We also have a button for that power rear window shade. Let's take a quick spin around the interior. Here you can see we have height adjustable seatbelts for the driver and the front passenger. Here you can see how the 6-way butterfly headrests work. You can actually move this portion of the headrest independently of the up and down and in and out modes of that headrest. Over here on the doors, we have a lot of soft touch material. We also have some stitched pleather on the doors. That's not real leather, that is just imitation leather. It will last a little bit longer. 3-position seat memory for the passenger. We have this gorgeous bamboo wood on the dashboard and on the steering wheel. I really like the bamboo in the GS Hybrid. It is an interesting alternative to the walnut and oak and other materials that you'll find in most luxury vehicles. I have this enormous 12-inch information display right there in the dashboard. If you want to know more about that, follow the link at the bottom. We've separated the infotainment reviews from the rest of the reviews. Down here we have our optional Mark Levinson sound system, tri-zone climate control. We control the 2 zones right here with these buttons, and the 3rd zone you can either control from the back or from that 12-inch display. Single slot CD right there, eject button, volume knob, tuning knob over there. Below that we have our heated and cooled front seats with an auto mode. So this will automatically heat or cool your seat depending on ambient temperature as well as the temperature outside. This cover controls covers the large cup holders right up front. These easily accommodated large takeout sodas, and there's really nothing around here to interfere with those large takeout sodas either. Moving down, we have our traditional shifter with our drive mode select knob. This has an eco mode, normal mode, sport, and sport plus. This affects the engine, the way the transmission shifts, as well as the suspension in this vehicle. We have an EV mode button and a snow button right there as well. Over here we have the Lexus remote touch controller. Rather than a knob like BMW or Mercedes uses, it uses a sort of mousy style joystick with a menu button. It's an up and down or zoom in and out, and a direct map and repeat voice direction button. This is probably my least favorite input method, however, in modern luxury vehicles. Behind that we have a fairly good sized center console. It slides back and then it opens right there like that. We have a little divider there. We have our USB port as well as one auxiliary input and an additional 12-volt power port. Over on the driver's side, we have a 4-dial instrument cluster, and this is a usual hybrid Power Eco charge gauge, but it also changes into a tachometer depending on what drive mode you're in. This color portion right up here also goes red to green depending on which drive mode you're in. Personally, I prefer the tachometer look, so that's how I spent most of my time driving in the GS. We also have this small multi-information LCD display right there between the gauges. Can change some vehicle settings. We have a little hybrid power display right there, miles per gallon, average economy, that sort of thing, as well as our tire pressure. If we zoom out, we can see this gorgeous partial wood steering wheel. This is really one of my favorite steering wheels on the market right now. One thing is that this is not heavily lacquered bamboo, actually, so you can really feel the natural grain of the wood. Decent sport grips there. Wood continues on the bottom in this 3-spoke design. Over here we have our cruise control controls, phone buttons, voice command button, back button for the display. This display button controls that little display right there in the center. And then over here we have our radio buttons, track up, down, volume up, down, and mode. The GS has a surprisingly accommodating trunk even in this hybrid trim. The hybrid battery pack is right back there against the rear seat back, so it does eat into some of the trunk space, but the GS has a fairly large trunk in all of its versions, which makes it an awful lot easier to store cargo back here. This is the largest bag you can carry on a domestic flight. As you can see, you can actually put one that was a little bit shorter than this in an upright fashion right here in the back. This is a 24-inch bag, so if you had a 22-inch carry-on, you could definitely line up 3 of them right across here and then put larger luggage deeper into the trunk. It's kind of unique in this segment because an awful lot of the trunks that the Lexus competes with are a little bit shallow and a little bit less useful. If we pull this bag out, it is now time for our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. Trunk is very easy to get into with a low step-in height. It's also very nicely furnished in here. We score 8 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index because this trunk even has a headliner under here. So even this top of the trunk is very nicely finished. You also have these nice shopping bag holders and other bag holders so you can easily hang bags on the back. And we have a power trunk lid. The GS 450 Hybrid has 2 very distinct missions. The first is to be the most efficient Lexus GS available in the United States. That's because the GS 300 Hybrid, which is available in Japan and other Lexus markets, is not sold in the United States, and that uses a smaller engine as well as a slightly different transmission. It's borrowed from the Lexus IS 300H Hybrid, which is also not available in the United States. But the GS 450H has a second mission, and that's to be the best performance GS available in the United States. Because the only one we get here is the GS 350 other than this. There's no longer a V8 GS model, so there's really nothing to directly compete with the likes of the BMW 550i or the Mercedes-Benz twin-turbo V8 model either. That means we should talk about fuel economy first, and we've been averaging about 31 to 32 miles per gallon in the GS 450H over this week. That's a significant improvement over the last generation of Lexus GS Hybrid. It's about a 35% improvement or so. That's all down to the engine, because this engine is now operating on an Atkinson cycle, which trades power for efficiency in general terms. The result is much improved efficiency. Now, Lexus also did some additional tweaks to the engine, the transmission, and the rest of the drivetrain to help compensate for that power reduction. So we still get the 338 system horsepower, which means we still get a 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds. 6 seconds to 60 is definitely not as fast as the V8 competition. It's actually a little bit slower than BMW's twin-turbo 3-liter inline-6 engine as well. That's in the BMW 535i. However, this gets much better fuel economy than the 535i. In fact, it gets much better fuel economy than even the BMW 528i with its 2-liter turbo. So while we don't have quite the performance of that twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine, we have much better fuel economy. In terms of driving feel behind the wheel and the feel as this car gets up to 60 miles an hour, the feel is actually very similar to BMW's twin-turbo engine and definitely superior to the 3.5-liter V6 that Mercedes-Benz uses in the E350. The reason for that is the electric motors. The electric motors broaden the torque curve in this engine. They deliver an awful lot of torque at low end, which is exactly what turbos do to a regular engine as well. So you get a very similar effect in many respects. Part of the reason we have that 6-second 0 to 60 run also is that the Lexus GS 450H turns off its engine at stoplights. It's very difficult to get the car to keep that engine on, but if you do manage, if you sort of brake torque the engine, put your foot on the brake and then tap on the accelerator just a little bit to get the engine going, then you can get a 0 to 60 time that's about 0.2 of a second faster. Compared with the other hybrids out on the market, the Lexus scores towards the bottom end of the pack in terms of 0 to 60 performance. This is definitely slower to 60 than the BMW, the Infiniti, or the Acura hybrid. We haven't had a chance to test the Mercedes E400, so we don't have any numbers on that one, but by the looks of things, it's probably going to be just a little bit slower than this Lexus GS. Where the Lexus GS, however, really shines is in the handling and feel out on the road. Very much like the GS 350, the GS 450H has a very good, very precise feel on these winding mountain roads. It feels very accurate, it feels very nimble. It also feels very light in the front, which is an excellent thing in this category. In contrast, the BMW 335 as well as the BMW twin-turbo V8s just feel an awful lot heavier. They're less willing to change direction, they feel less connected, the steering feels just a little bit less precise. Part of that's just because of the engineering effort that Lexus put into the GS 450h, and part of that is because BMW has been redesigning themselves as a solid European luxury player rather than a sports maker first. So they've really been getting a little bit softer and a little bit heavier as a result of that conflicting new mission. On the flip side, because of electric power steering, we have the ability to change not only the gear ratio in the steering wheel, but also the amount of boost that the car is giving you to the steering. That's adjustable by that drive mode select that we saw earlier in the center console. We have several different modes ranging from Eco to Normal to Sport and Sport Plus, and those affect a number of different vehicle systems, not only the steering but also the way the throttle is mapped, some engine performance numbers, as well as the damping in the suspension. The suspension goes from a moderately firm to a firm range. It's never going to be that harsh because this is a luxury vehicle and it's not something that's trying to compete with an M5 or an AMG vehicle, so it's not going to be really stiff, but it does have a nice firmness to it. That dynamic suspension helps compensate for the fact that the wheelbase in this car is among the shortest in the group. It really does improve the highway ride. I would easily rank this among the best in the segment in terms of ride quality. The GS is a surprising amount of fun to drive out on these winding mountain roads, even though the transmission behaves quite like a CVT. Again, I don't really have a problem with CVTs in general, so it didn't surprise me that I really took to the way the GS 450 feels out on the road. There's definitely an endless amount of power going on in this engine. It feels very torquey, definitely feels like it has a little bit more oomph than 337 horsepower. Like most hybrids, there is an EV mode button in the dashboard, but if we press it, we're going to get a beep from the car. That's because this car will only operate in EV mode up to about 25 miles an hour or so. The car will actually operate as a pure EV without turning on the engine up to about 40 miles an hour, but it won't engage EV mode for you. And you have to treat it really gently in order to do that up to about 40 miles an hour. That top-end EV speed is really dictated by the battery pack and not the motor. These motors are about 300 horsepower or so in this car. That's just the way the transmission is designed. It's the battery pack that can't put out quite that much power. It's limited to somewhere around 25 or 30 horsepower, depending on who you believe. Toyota doesn't exactly have specific numbers on the power output capabilities of that battery pack. Like most of the other hybrids in this segment, the GS is rear-wheel drive only. That's an important thing to keep in mind for a few reasons. If you live in the snow belt, you might want to look at something else. The gasoline-only version of the GS does have an all-wheel drive variety available, so it's something to keep in mind if you're in one of those snow-prone areas. But the other thing to keep in mind is that front wheels do the majority of the braking in a vehicle. It's just the weight balance thing going on in the car. And because this is rear-wheel drive, and the rear wheels are the only things that are connected to the motors in this car, the regenerative braking feel is a little peculiar, and it's probably the most peculiar of this immediate competitive set. The problem is that if you apply the brakes moderately to gently, everything seems normal, and the transition between regenerative braking and friction braking happens very normally. But if you're a little bit more aggressive on the pedal, there's this moment about a second or so into the braking where all of a sudden you get an awful lot more grab. It's very disconcerting. It's difficult in moderate to moderately heavy braking to have a good progressive brake feel in this car. It makes the other passengers in the car feel like you don't know what you're doing while you're driving. If, however, you need a panic stop, that feels totally normally. So gentle stops, panic stops, totally fine. It's really just everything in between where the GS just lacks the polish that you'll find in a Prius or the Lexus ES300H or in the Lexus CT Hybrid, which are all very good in terms of regenerative braking feel and the interaction between that regenerative braking and friction braking. Somehow, this Lexus GS just gets it a little bit wrong. We also didn't notice this problem in the Lexus LS Hybrid, which is a very, very expensive hybrid, so you'd expect it to be better, but that's also all-wheel drive, so that may have something to do with that. The 450h is without a doubt the best GS that Lexus has ever made. Unfortunately, the competition hasn't been standing idly by, and they really have made significant progress with their hybrid models, as well as their mid-size luxury sedans in general. The rest of the competition, almost without exception, have twin-turbo engines available. Even the Cadillac CTS has a twin-turbo V6 that puts down an awful lot more power and gets reasonable fuel economy. The CTS also has by far the best feel out on the road in terms of every model. Of course, Cadillac doesn't have a hybrid model at this point, so it's really difficult to compare any version of CTS directly to this GS 450h. But I do have to say that the Cadillac is probably the best driving car in this segment. The Germans, of course, have their twin-turbo V8s, which produce an awful lot more power and are really kind of in a league of their own. That leaves Lexus in some ways to compete more directly with Infiniti and Acura just because they don't have a complete lineup. Pricing for the 2014 model year starts at $60,430, and if you get crazy with the options, you can get your GS450H up to $76,410. That makes this the second most expensive starting entry in this segment. It's more expensive than everything except that BMW Active Hybrid 5. However, if you get really crazy with the options on both of the German options, you're going to get far more expensive than this Lexus GS450H. The Infiniti Q70 Hybrid is relatively value priced in comparison, but probably the bargain entry in this segment really is that Acura RLX, because it starts about the same price. Final pricing is a little bit unsure from Acura at this point in time, but it's going to start right around this $60,000 mark, and it's going to go up to about $66,000 fully loaded, which would represent about a $10,000 discount versus this Lexus model. That RLX is also the only all-wheel drive hybrid in this mid-size luxury sedan market. Audi will of course be bringing their Audi A6 hybrid to the market, but we don't have many details on that at this time. This segment is very competitive and all the entries are very good entries. Some things to keep in mind, however, when you're shopping around in this segment is that the Infiniti model, even though it has a new name, it's not a new vehicle, it hasn't been refreshed in a little bit, and that E400, even though we have a new nose on the car, the interior is getting a little bit old. That means that the Lexus is probably my number 2 or number 3 pick in this segment. I really like that BMW Active 5 Hybrid, but I really like this GS as well. The new Acura RLX is an interesting entry. I might place that second. I might place it just a little bit above the Lexus just because of the value. We haven't had that for a full week, so my opinion may change. Be sure to stay tuned for that video coming up. The Lexus does have some excellent things going for it, however. It's probably the best handling vehicle in this segment, and that may surprise you, especially with the BMW Active 5 Hybrid being here with its inline-6 engine and very well-balanced nature. But honestly, if you have them out on the track, like I have, this is a much better handling vehicle than that BMW. It feels an awful lot lighter, it feels more responsive, it feels much more connected to the road. So if you're after the best handling vehicle, the best driver's vehicle in this segment, oddly enough, a Lexus Hybrid with a eCVT is going to be your option. The Q70 is definitely the gadget lover's car. We have an awful lot more autonomous driving technology going on in that Infiniti than any other entry in this segment. The BMW is oddly the best luxury pick. It has the best ride, I think, of all. It's a little bit softer than the Lexus. It's also a little bit more luxurious. We have an awful lot more room there in the back. If your goal is to carry passengers, especially in the back, then you're going to need to stick with those Germans because they tend to have a more classic profile with a taller greenhouse and a little bit more room in the back. If you need all-wheel drive, your only option is going to be that Acura RLX. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2014 Lexus GS450 Hybrid. Be sure and comment on this video, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, what we could improve upon in the next video. You can also email me, just follow those instructions down there in the banner. You can also find me at facebook.com/AlexOnAutos, and we'll see you next week.